It started in 4 minutes. Well, hello, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Renee Dowling from Reflections Art Studio and Community Classroom. I'd like to welcome you to my studio. I know we're all in isolation, and so instead of you coming to me, to my art studio, I'm coming to you, to your home. I'm hoping that you can join me today and create along with me. My goal is to help people express themselves. So I teach them art techniques to help you do that. Your art will be unique and different than what mine is. You can use the same techniques, of course, but because this is a visual journaling process, what I do isn't necessarily what you'll want to do. I do visual journaling for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's to express my feelings and to let them go. Sometimes it's for problem solving. Other times it's just because I want to remember something special that happened, or an event, or a trip. Sometimes it's for problem solving and then setting goals and moving forward. And then also, of course, it's to practice art techniques, to get better, to try out new media. And I do it in a visual journal because a visual journal is like a good friend. You can tell your journal anything and they won't judge you harshly. You can take your visual journal anywhere you go. I usually take one when I go When I leave the house, I usually put one in my purse so that if I'm waiting in line or waiting for my husband to shop in a store that I don't want to go to, I'll pull out my journal and journal. You can visual journal on anything. You can use watercolor paper, mixed media paper. I've seen people even do visual journaling on file folders, Bristol board, whatever you have. I'm using a Moleskine visual journal that I found at Staples, and it's specifically for watercolor paper. Yesterday was my first day using it, so I'm getting pretty used to the pages and how they accept multimedia. What I thought I would do is I would go back and review what we did yesterday, and then we'll do a new background. And then we'll go back to the page that we started yesterday and talk about what we can do to bring it to closure. And then also make some time for possibly some photo transfers. So I'll just lower the camera. Hopefully I have a better view today. There we go. All right. So yesterday what we did is we started with a wash. So we, first of all, wetted our paint, and then we did a light wash over the background, and then added some water to the page, and then added wet paint to a wet paper. Then we used different tools like a cork, bubble wrap, canvas mesh to make some marks. Then we also did a wash over top of everything to kind of blend it together. We used watercolor pencils. I showed everybody how to use a Crayola marker to create paint if you don't have paint at home. And then we added some collage. I took some pieces of old map and made a path here. And my theme was connections and how I felt really connected yesterday because I had a whole bunch of people join me. And on the internet for this Facebook Live video. And then we stopped there. So, and then we did a little bit more collage. I found a dictionary page that said connection, so I added that. So, and then we also did a little bit of journaling on some tissue paper, and we glued it upside down to make it private, and we repeated things in 3 different ways. So I added a few more things after that, but we'll come back to that in a few minutes. So first I'm going to go to a fresh new page, and I like to clip the corners together. So when I start to add some water to the pages, they sometimes buckle, and this will keep it flat. All right, and some things that we're going to use for today, we're going to start the background by collaging papers. And I'm going to use a Yoo-Hoo stick to do most of the collaging. But if you don't, the reason why I like Yoo-Hoo stick is because it's washable, it's non-toxic, and it's acid-free. I have an old magazine that I use to glue upon, and then when the glue dries, you can just keep reusing it over and over again instead of getting glue over top of everything. I also have some Liquitex matte gel medium, and you can use this. What this does is it really seals everything up. It does leave a little coating on the top, so it does change how your watercolor reacts to the page, but it's still livable. If you don't have any glue, like a Yoo-Hoo stick or gel medium, you can take regular school glue. I put some in a baby jar and then added some drops of water, and when it has a good consistency, it's kind of runny. It does dry a little bit slower, but I do have a blow dryer that I use. We are also going to be first I'm going to start off with some music pages, and this is just photocopy out of some books. And what I usually look for is the notes. Are they appealing to me? Or sometimes I look for the lyrics as well. Excuse me. So I'm going to start with this. Now, if you want a really clean edge, you can get a ruler and tear down the side. Actually, I'm going to go like this and pull the big side. If I don't usually like to have straight edges, because then you get marks when you paint over top and you have to kind of deal with the straight edge. But it's good if you're going to put it along the side of your page. Lots of times I just tear. Paper has a bias and it tears in a specific direction. So if you're finding that it's ripping funny, then try to tear it in the other direction, sometimes pushing up or down. I'm just trying to get rid of some white borders. And since my book is little, I think I might just take one strip. I didn't wait as long today to start because yesterday I waited for quite some time, and then it was really boring at the beginning for people to watch. So then I decided to start on time. So here's my magazine page. And I never used to like glue sticks because I always thought that they didn't hold very well. The Yoo-Hoo stick is really sticky, but also the reason why I had a hard time with my students in my classroom is because they would often not put enough glue down, and then it would fall off by the end of the day. So that's why I like this glue stick. It's way better than the Elmer's glue stick. No offense to Elmer's. And I'm just going to line it up with the edge. Now, one idea that I saw was you just wet. I never use paper towel, but you can if you like. I'm wetting my rag, just kind of pushing down. This will make it stick better to the page, but also wipe off any glue that might have gushed out the side. I also like to repeat things at least 3 times in my journal. It's called the invisible triangle in the artist circle and in the decorating circle. And just make sure this is on the screen. And you don't have to always, like, music goes left or right, but you don't always have to do that. So I decided to go vertical. I might go across the top of the page so it acts like a border. Now, if any of these steps that you don't want to do, you feel free, you don't have to do them. I'm just going to go get another glue stick. I think I use this all up. I just bought a whole box of these glue sticks at Staples. I have this is photocopy of music, but I sometimes just I found a whole box at a garage sale for $1, so sometimes I just tear up those music books and use them right in my journal because I will never play them. They're like the beginning intro books with different exercises that I don't need for myself because I've graduated. Oh, I see, I just put my music upside down. That's okay. You could still tear it off, but let's go with the flow and not worry about perfection at this stage. And I'm going to look again here. When you're starting a page, sometimes you want to start off with a prompt, like I am, or I wish, I dream. It might be about your goals that you want to set for yourself or a special thing that you remember. It might be about your feelings that you're having at this moment or that you want to get off your chest. It might be something like I want or I need. It could be a page about gratitude or appreciation. It could be a mantra that you want to set for yourself. It could also be about a trip or even a book that you just finished reading. The possibilities are endless. It's up to you what you want to put in your journal. I have been Skyping with my granddaughter a lot. She just got a new iPad. And she's 5 years old, and she is staying at home because the schools in California are closed. Her family also chose, her daycare is still open, but they chose to keep them at home, her and her sister at home. So she's been Skyping me in the afternoons, and we have been doing art together and reading. Yesterday we played with Barbies and my Buzz Lightyear and Woody dolls and some paper dolls. Sometimes we sing. And so I think I'm going to do this page about her. And so maybe I'll go like that. Just make sure you get around the edges. Otherwise, sometimes they lift when you're adding the rest of your media. Oops, I'm sorry. And it's okay to overlap what you've already done. You go across the edges too if you like. I'm just kind of making a frame. There. So the next thing I'm going to add is I'm going to add some pages from an old novel. And just remember when you're not using your glue stick to put the lid on. I saw a lady today on YouTube and she forgot to put her lid on. And what she did is she just took a knife and cut the skim off and then she still could use her glue stick. I never knew. I thought once it dried it was toast. So that's great. All right, so I am just grabbing some random pages from a Jack and Jill novel. I actually am using the Jack and Jill novel as a visual journal for my granddaughter that I'm going to give her when she grows up. And what I'm going to do is I just grabbed a random page and I'm using an artist's, a Pitt artist pen from Faber-Castell. It is water soluble, so when I put watercolor over top, it's not going to spread. You could use a ballpoint pen if you don't have any special markers. I don't use Sharpies because I find that they leave an odor that I don't like. You could also use something like a pencil, but a pencil does spread sometimes. So I'm just going to go through and see if I can find any words that are relevant to my granddaughter. I'm going to circle the word merry because she is very merry. She has the cutest little giggle. And this is about hair, and I'm not going to try to focus on how she looks because I just want to be more like how she is as a person. Oh, I like this one, Great Delight. I'm going to circle it a few times. The reason why I'm circling it is because it might become a special word that I would use later on. And I want it, when I'm adding layers, I might go around those words so they stand out. And oh, she loves to search for things. When we go to the beach, she's climbing rocks and looking for starfish and all kinds of little critters. Oh, she's very lively. She always has her eye out for things. I'll circle the Mary here too. That's probably enough for that section. So then I'm going to just tear it. And I like those little edges that you get because when you go over it with paint, it goes a little bit darker and it adds some more dynamics to your background. And that's the focus of today, is trying to get a dynamic background, something interesting to look at. I like to leave numbers showing as well. And again, I'm going to try to repeat in 3 different spots. I might, you can put it smack dab in the middle of your page if you like, but I prefer to work around the border and sort of leave that available for other things. I'm going to overlap with that too. So I'm also going to show you, if you do have some gel medium, or this is called matte gel medium from Liquitex. There's all golden and all kinds of brands. You might use Mod Podge. I haven't used that before, but I know it'll work too. I've used a paint strip or paint spreader, or whatever you call them, instead of a paintbrush, because I found that I used to wreck all my paintbrushes using this, and I'm just going to put a thin layer on the back. I've also seen people put a thin layer on the page and then apply it, but I don't always get it right exactly where it's supposed to be. And then by using the scraper, you can make sure that you get a thin layer and not waste a whole bunch, because the gel medium is expensive. Again, you can just use your glue stick, and you can just use your glue and water mixture if you like. Now I can see I should have maybe waited a little bit because my black circles are running a little bit. So I'm just kind of showing you. I'm not going to use it very much because it does leave a sort of a shiny plastic coating on your things, and then it makes it a little bit harder to paint with watercolors, but it is an option that you can. And then I also just make sure that you wipe everything off so that you don't have big chunks and get scratches and stuff on your page. So I'm also going to try to maybe put 2 other places with some page. You can notice that when I added the gel medium, it sort of darkened the page a little tiny bit, but it's okay. It'll dry and we'll just deal with it later. I'm just going to turn this over and see if there's anything on this side to use. Oh, here's the word pleased. Oh, she looked pleased when she does things like she's drawing princesses right now. This is kind of funny, but they do lots of things like jumping on the sofa and making tents. So I'll include that maybe. Oh, we like to make funny faces when we take pictures of ourselves. Ooh, draw. We like to draw lots together. And I'll also circle the word 3 because now it's Riley, her sister, and her and myself that are together. Okay, so I'm just going to tear. And sometimes when I do this, I don't even pay attention to what's on the page. And I'll just grab any old random page and tear it in any old way. Sometimes it's in long strips or triangles or circles or whatever. But I thought I'd make this a little bit more meaningful since it's about my granddaughters. And I'm going to put it maybe up here sideways. Makes it a little bit more interesting when everything's not going the same way. If you have a book that is really thick, what I've seen suggested is you take your glue or your water bottle and just spritz your paper, and it sort of loosens up the fibers, and then it integrates better into your page. So here I got some lumps. So, okay, and on this one, okay, I'll circle this too. She likes to dress, go and dress. She likes to go places. She's always on the move, and she loves to dress up in fancy dresses and wear jewelry. There, I think that's all I want from this page. And I just have a whole box of pages. Sometimes I just tear out certain words that I like. All right, I'm just going to do a little piece this time. And let's see, where shall I put this one? There's really no right and wrong. Some people just say, just go for it. But I think I'll put it there. If you have any questions, just put it in the comments, or if you have any compliments, put it there too. I'd love to see, as you're working, what you're doing, and have some work in progress pictures, and so that I could share it on, let everybody know what good work is happening in the world. There. I'll just clean up a little bit. I'm just going to lift the screen a little bit here so I can see who's joining us. Oh, hi, Wendy and Tracy and Shannon. Nice to see that you're joining me. I'm learning better. Yesterday I had my nose up like this and I thought, oh, that's not very appealing. So I'll put it back down. Okay, so what I'm going to just do is I'm just going to dry this a little bit with my blow dryer. It feels a little bit damp from the water. And when things are wet, of course, they're a little bit cool, so you can tell that if they're at room temperature, then it's dry. Some of my edges are totally damp. Oh, I missed a whole bunch here. All right, so at this stage, then what you can also do is, if you want to, you could add some journaling, and you just cover over it, like it's just a first layer. And so this journaling is just sort of part of the background. It's sort of part of the essence of the page, but it won't be very easily read. Again, you can use just a regular ballpoint pen or pencil crayon. You could use I've seen people use water-soluble crayons, but then when you go over top, of course, it's going to run. I'm going to use my Pitt pen that I used before. And so this is sort of like free writing. And of course, this is about my granddaughter, Brooklyn. So I'm going to start by writing Brooklyn, her name. And then whatever comes to mind, I'm going to write down. And this isn't about correct grammar or spelling and all that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of free writing is what it's called for some people. And so it's about take about 7 minutes just to write down. If it's about yourself, you can start with I am. Sometimes I get to the point after the 7 minutes, I don't really know what to write. I might even write that. I don't know what to write. It could be about your trip. Just sometimes what I've also done is I've just picked a word. So on this one here, I chose the word believe. And so I just chose a whole bunch of B words and just kept writing all things that were related, relevant, things that I liked that started with B, things or goals that I had that started with B, bravery, find the beauty in things and stuff like that. So if you want to do that kind of thing, that's another option. And that you don't always have to write vertically. You can write horizontally. Or let's say that again. You don't always have to write horizontally. You can write vertically or diagonally. Maybe I'm going to start sideways. You don't even have to be neat because we're going to be covering this up. It'll be just little pieces going through. If you get stuck, then just start with the same prompt that you started with. You can just turn your page and then write in a different direction. I'm going to turn it again. And it's okay if you don't fill the whole page. I think I'm going to stop right there. And then I'm just going to use my blow dryer just to make sure it's dry before I go on. So there are lots of things that you can do next. Like all the things that I'm showing you, you can do in any order. One of the things, excuse me. One of the things that you could do is, like right now, it looks pretty patchy and it's very busy. So you can do a couple of things. One is you can apply some gel medium, or this is gesso, and gesso is like a paint primer. And what it does is it sort of puts a light coating over everything and sort of makes it all cohesive. This is just Artist Loft gesso, but I will never buy this again because I find it really smelly. You can also, if you have just some white paint, this is titanium white from Golden, and you can add a little water to it and you can go over it. You can use just regular. I've also seen people take tissue paper and put a layer over top, but I don't really like that right at this stage. I just like it for little things. So what you can just do too is pick a color from your paint palette and just paint over everything. I think what I'm going to do, when you add gesso, what it does is it adds a little tooth to your papers because these are quite smooth, and then it accepts your watercolor paper in a different, or watercolor paint in a different way than it would do on just a regular piece of paper. I think what I'll do is I'll just add a little bit of gesso here and there. And again, I'm going to use my paint scraper instead of a brush. You can use a sponge, you can use a brush. I've seen also people use cheesecloth, like whatever you have. And then I'm going to also try to avoid the areas where I have circled, just for now. Eventually they might get covered up. I try not to use my hands too much. Some people like to use gloves, but I was just trying to avoid those words. It's pretty intense there. See, and then it just changes the intensity of the paper. Sometimes when you add watercolor paint to book pages, it browns a little bit depending on the age of your book. And then I'm going to just kind of see how the words are becoming part of the background a little bit more. And then what this also does is it joins everything together. Sometimes I don't do this at all and I just jump right in with the watercolor paint. Or acrylic paint you can use too if that's what you have on hand. With acrylic paint, you just add a little bit of water to make it thinner so that things still show through. I might also pull out my brush here. And you don't have to do the whole page, you could just do certain parts so that certain parts stick out. I'm just going to use my brush around the words because they're so close together. Dry it off. I usually have my music playing quite loud when I work, but Facebook sent me a message yesterday saying they didn't like the fact that I was playing music that didn't belong to me, so they muted everything, except for my voice was still. So I have music playing, but it's quite soft, so hopefully they don't have to do the same thing today. There. So you're probably thinking, well, why would you do all the writing and then cover it up? But it's just kind of capturing an essence of something and adds some interest in the background. Okay. When we're doing this, it's important that each layer is dry, because if you're adding watercolor paint to wet surfaces, it will spread and change the color of everything. I think I'm still going to go over this a little bit more. Or sometimes if it'll get brown if you're not careful, unless you like brown. There. And then if you get too much and you can't scrape it off, you can always take your rag and dab it off too. There. Oops. Okay. So again, always take care of your tools because tools are expensive. Clean them off and put the lids on things so you don't waste. And then another important thing is, if you did use a brush, push it down your water container all the way and get it off, and then wipe it right away. And don't leave your brushes in the water, because what happens is the glue inside of this metal part loosens and then you have hairs everywhere. I can't stand that. That's gross. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure this is dry. I'm trying to get Facebook Live to work on my computer so I can see your comments, and it keeps saying it's not working. Okay. That's pretty good. All right, so next is trying to add some dynamics. I am going to use watercolor paint, and yesterday I was all about circles, but today I feel like using squares and rectangles. So some tools that I'm going to use are, this is a Tic Tac box. I love using the bottom. You get some really neat kind of squares or rectangles. And then I found this, I don't know, I think it was like separating a whole bunch of glue sticks together or something, or it was for it was from weaving from the kindergartners, and they gave it to me. So I cut them up into these squares. And then I have some canvas mesh, and then I do have a stencil. I do not use stencils very often because I prefer to use things I can just find around the house. But what we're going to do is try to add some contrast. So I have different sizes of squares, and I'm going to start off with the larger squares. And I like to start on the borders and work away around, and then sort of leave the middle until I decide exactly what's going to be the focal point. Sometimes my clients, they start right in the middle, and then you have this big blob to deal with, and which makes things difficult. So I like to start on the edges. And I'm going to use a dry brush. This is a stenciling brush, but you could use a stiff acrylic brush. The reason why I don't use watercolor brush is because watercolor brushes are meant to hold a lot of liquid, and you don't want it too wet because then the paint will bleed underneath whatever you're using. So you can use whatever you like corks, the end of a pencil, Q-tips, whatever you like. But this is what I'm going with today. Now, Brooklyn loves pink, but she also has been wearing a lot of like Elsa costumes and princess costumes with blue. So I'm going to start with blue, which I haven't done for a very, very long time. And these are professional watercolors. I like them the best because they have they're very dark, or they have a lot of pigment, and they are more vibrant than just some cheapy sets. But if that's all you have, that's fine. I showed this to people yesterday, but I'll show it to you in case you're new today. If you just have Crayola markers and you don't have paint, what you can do is you just paint. This is a plastic lid from like Cool Whip or something. You can just paint with your Crayola crayons, and then you just activate it with some water. And then voila, you have washable watercolor paint. And I'll just show you over here. There. I'm getting green because I just dipped my brush in blue, but so yeah, there's no excuse. You don't need expensive things. You can just use your Crayola markers. If that's all you have, it works quite well. And you can also use the fine tip ones. It works the same way. They're just, as long as they're washable. You could also try using highlighters. That works too. Okay, so I'm just going to dry this a little bit here. Okay, so back to the blue. Where did I put my stencil brush? There we go. All right, so I always make sure that my stencil brush is clean before I use it, because I share all my supplies. When my clients come out, they use my supplies. And I want to, but I still need some water on the paint for it to work. So lots of times what I do is I will go on the paint, and sometimes I just tap it on my rag, just take a little bit off. And I like threes. Threes are a nice pattern. There, so it's quite light still, so that's good. And I'm going to try to repeat that in 2 other places at least. I'm going to try down here, and I'm going to go across both of the pages so that I can connect both sides. I like to work across 2 pages because as one side's drying, then I can be working on the other side. And then I'm also going to repeat over here, and I'm going to do, I think, all 3 down here in the middle. Threes are used in all kinds of artistic things, especially like interior design, flower arranging. So why 3 is because then it leads your eye from one pattern to the next, and we call that the invisible triangle in art. One thing to make sure that you do is you clean off whatever you're using so that next time you don't get disappointed because you left blue on your stencil and you didn't want blue this time, and now you have blue. All right, so we're always looking for try to build some different interest and contrast. So these ones are very large, and so now I'm going to go to a smaller square. This is canvas mesh used for needlepoint and that kind of stuff. I found this at Salvation Army, at the Post, and I got about 6 sheets that were like by 11 and a half by 17, and I only paid like $2 for them. So I like that when art supplies are not expensive. I'm going to use the same blue. This time I'm going to go here in the corner. You don't need to cover the whole thing. You can just be random. And what this does is then it shows you the negative part, the part that's missing. That's not very dark, so I'm going to add again, try to add in 3 different spots. If it's not cooperating, then you might have to add more water, but if you have too much water, then you get a pool. There, that's a bit better. Just gonna add a little bit more. And I am also going to add here, and I'm also going to overlap what I already did with the large squares just to see what happens. There. Now, there's still paint on here, but you can turn it around and push down, and what you get is the positive. So whatever the canvas, which is a really neat look. So if you prefer that look, you don't even have to do the dabbing. You could just paint right on the canvas and then push it down like a rubber stamp. You can also activate it with your water. Push down. And then lift up. So it's really light, which is nice. And then, of course, do yourself a favor, clean it off. With canvas, sometimes you have to run it under the water at the sink to get it all out. Okay. And then I'm going to add one more layer. This time I'm not going to use blue. I'm going to start adding another color. Now, you always have to remember with watercolor is whatever, you have to always remember what you use. So I use blue, so whatever I'm adding to it is going to mix with it. I'm actually going to dry this a little bit first because I want the next color to mix in, but not totally. I'm also using blue because Brooklyn likes the ocean, and this is ocean colors for me. So I'm going to use this one now, and I'm going to start working a little bit. Oh, there's some spots here that haven't been. So I'm going to use yellow this time. And of course, yellow and blue make what color? Green. And I've obviously not cleaned my brush very well because I already have green without even mixing. And I'm going to now start going over top what I've already done. And then the yellow is going to start tying everything in, but also leaving some, this is called visual texture because it looks like you can touch it but it's just smooth. So that was quite wet right there. So I don't really like that. and it's also absorbing into the paper, so that's what's happening there. Don't worry at this again, this is the second layer, actually the third layer, and we're going to add several more. So if you don't like something, you can always disguise it later and cover it up. So it's no big deal. There, and I'm going to go up here. And again, if I want to, I could turn it over upside down like I did with the mesh, and you get a little bit more yellow. All right, not very crazy about that green, but oh well, there's green plants on the ocean. And just because I'm talking about the ocean doesn't mean I have to, at the end, draw a picture of the ocean and the beach and all that. This is just representing. Okay. So now I'm going to dry this before I continue. It's important to move your dryer back and forth and not hold it in one spot for too long. I've had some people burn their page. When you're using things like gel medium or paint, if you hold your heat too long, it could bubble, which you usually want if you want to journal this type of stuff. Okay, so this is looking still quite busy, but that's okay. Now what I'm going to decide is what colors am I going to introduce next. Since she does like pink, I'm going to introduce magenta. Now what I could do is I could do some more patterns, but I think it's busy enough. I could also just do a wash. And I'm just going to, because this is relatively dry. Oh, I forgot to use this one. I'll maybe save it for later. I'm just going to sort of test it in the corner and see what happens when I mix it to that greeny color, because if it gets too green, then I'm not going to be, or brown, I'm not going to be very happy. And you don't have to put it everywhere, but this is just sort of a way of connecting things together and adding new color. This one's going to be fun because we're going to get purple. And if your paper is very absorbent, you might have to use a whole lot more paint. With watercolor paint, you want to try to start with light and then get darker as you go. Lots of people, when they're first learning, as they get too dark too fast, and then they have to problem solve. Like, how am I going to add any interest to that when it's so dark? And if something is getting too dark, then you can just lift paint off like that. And then I'll just repeat it down here a little bit. I don't want it to be too pink because I still think I like the blue idea. Go on the edge. And a little bit more here. The whole idea of visual journaling, it's the process and not necessarily the outcome. This is supposed to be a time that you set for yourself. Make me time. I used to tell myself I didn't have time for me time, but then I realized how much time I spent watching TV. So then I would set the timer for myself after supper and say, okay, I deserve 20 minutes And next thing you know, it was 3 hours later and I was still doing it. So I had lots of time. When I was teaching full time, then I also had that excuse that I didn't have time. But then I got to the point where I was just living and breathing teaching and not doing anything else. So I had to make some promises to myself that I was going to go to work early, around 7:30, and work till the bell rang. Sometimes I'd work at recess time or a little bit at lunch. Then I'd work till 5 o'clock, and then after that, nothing. No schoolwork unless it was report card time. Because there's more to life than teaching or whatever else, being a nurse or whatever else you do. And I'll just go around, go and dress. I think what I want to do is add yellow again because I think it would look really neat with this pink. And I'm covering up, oh, see there's brown. Okay, yellow. Obviously I like yellow, I hardly have any left. I just filled it the other day. And again, if there's parts that you don't like, just pat it off. The gesso sort of makes this not absorb as well as I like to just normally on watercolor paper. Oh, I got to add some here. There. So everything's starting to look pretty good together. Now what I want to do is, again, I'm going to dry it and then I'm going to add another layer. All right, so I'm going to do one more thing with paint, and that is I'm going to get a really wet brush. You can use a toothbrush if you have one for this, any kind of brush. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to flick some paint and kind of join it all together again with blue. Kind of introducing that blue back. Try not to get my microphone. There we go. And it's sort of like splashing of waves. Okay. So you can always go back and add more later. You can always show caution. I think purple would look really good on this page too. If you don't have purple, then what color should you add together? Blue and red. So if you're a teacher, this is really good for like grade 1 mixing colors. Ooh, beautiful. You can use red, but I use magenta or the magenta instead. Just add a little bit. There. Now, if you want to, you could do other things like add circles and stuff like that, but I'm going to just call it quits here for a minute and introduce a different media. Watercolor paint always dries lighter. So even though at first it's like, oh, it's too dark, it's starting to really lighten up and look really cute. Exactly what I wanted, more pastel-y color. All right, so next I'm going to use some pencil crayons, and I'm just going to clip my corner here and keep it flat. So this is kind of using some of the techniques that we learned yesterday. I have these Prismacolor watercolor or Prisma pencils, and I just love them. They're very expensive, but they last forever. I've had like hundreds of people use these, and they are still very long. They work best if they're sharpened. And I'm going to pick a color that's going to bring out the blues. So blue, a complementary color to blue is orange. I'm sort of worried that I already have purple on here, that I might get brown if I add orange. Complementary color to purple is yellow. So to remember those, you remember the Edmonton Oilers colors are orange and blue. Easter colors are purple and yellow. And Christmas colors are red and green. So I do have some green in here. No, I'm not going to go there. Okay, so let's try. I want to try to make these squares stand out a little bit more. So what shall I try? Well, let's try a little bit of the orange just to be brave and see what I get. Oh, it still works pretty good. So these are opaque. And they won't spread if you add water. And now that I've introduced orange there, I better put some orange over here too. Now let's say you don't like that, like you've added it and it's like after a while it's like, oh, why did I do that? You can take a white pencil crayon and go over top of it. Or if you have some wax crayons or some pastels, you can go over top too. But just remember, if you do that, it's hard to write over top of. But you can really lighten things up if you find it's too dark. But even by just doing that, it makes you look like you're looking through a window into like a deeper depth. So I'll keep adding some orange here. I don't mind it being pale, but I don't like the dark. That's what journaling is sort of all about, is problem solving. And you don't ditch it, you don't rip it up. You just move on if you don't like it, or you can always figure out how to disguise it. And I better add some orange here to get that triangle again. I decided not to do all the squares, just some of them. And notice I'm not being very neat because I'm going over it with the white anyway. Then you might also see if there's any lines that are in what you've collaged in the background that you can continue across. Or you might say at this stage, I've done enough. I think if I add any more, I'm going to wreck it. Sometimes it helps to just turn the page and start something new and then come back and look at it and say, okay, what do I like? What don't I like? Sometimes my pages like end at this stage and like a month later I come back and I add a layer to it. So I'm not quite sure what I want to do next, but so in the meantime, what I did is I have a picture that I photocopied, and I'm going to show you how to do a transfer. So you can use a couple of things. One is you can use packing tape. Or another thing that you can do is your gel medium. I did try using the glue and water mixture and that failed epically. So these are the best bets. The reason why I say you want a photocopy is because if you use an actual photograph, it has a glossy shine to it and it won't take to this technique. So I've made some copies of Brooklyn. This is her dance photo. I think those colors will look really good on here. And I think, ooh, I love how good one. So I made a black and white one and one with color. So I think I'm going to use the black and white one. Now, when you do a photo transfer, what that means is you will be able to save this image and put it over top of the background, and the background will show through the image, but you'll still see the photograph. All right. So I'm going to use the gel medium on this one, and then I'll show you using the packing tape on the black and white photograph. Now there are different kinds of gel medium you can get. This is matte. I prefer the matte because the glossy is shiny and it's hard to paint over the shiny. When you're applying, I'm just going to move this so it doesn't get in the way. So when you're doing this, make sure that you get a thin coat and cover the photograph. And try to not paint over it over and over and over again, because it'll leave streaks, unless you like streaks. And I'm also going to go down here, because Brooklyn wrote her name. Much to the dismay of her parents, but I like it. She was 4 when she did that. Okay, I'm just kind of moving around so I can, maybe I'll just put a little bit more. If this fails, then it's okay because it's just a copy and I can make another one. It works best if you do the copy on a photocopier, because sometimes like the inkjet printers, the ink will spread, but that's all I have is an inkjet printer, so, but a laser one would be best. Okay, so you want to make sure that, there. So now you want to make sure it's totally dry. Sorry about having to listen to my blow dryer. Whoa, that is a lot left over. Again, scrape it back in so you don't waste. Okay, here we go. I've had students draw a little drawing on just regular photocopy paper and put the gel medium over top, and it works on drawings or images that you find in magazines. You don't have to use photographs. You could use a quote. I've seen people use quotes and put them on, or little pieces of travel brochure. That feels pretty good. Oops. All right, so there's Brooklyn. She's all, it's mostly, I better do one more. It works better if you have thinner paper. Like if you have something that has cardboard has several layers. Hopefully this will work. It usually does, but of course when you show other people, it doesn't always, right? I'm just going to cut extra part off. And what you need is some water. Some people recommend you using warm water. just going to cut some of this extra off. If you want to, you could also cut around, but I like to have it flat and bigger piece to start with. All right, so the next step is you dip it in water. That's the scary part, right? What you're trying to do is soften the paper on the back. And then you put it down, and if you've missed some, then you can just spritz it. So you can see it starting to soften the paper. And now this is sort of you have to be patient with this process. What you want to do is you can use your hand or you can use a rag, but just be gentle to start with. And oh no, maybe my layer was too thin, is just gently roll off the paper. And what happens is the paper disappears, but the ink should stay stuck to the gel medium. Oh, and it does tear sometimes. I should have maybe put a thicker layer. But remember the goal. The goal is also to have some of the background show through. So it's not something that you're going to do if you're worried about being perfect, because things are going to go wrong. Be gentle. This is her face. Wow, it's 2:10 already. I had big ambitions, I guess, for an hour. Oh, there she is. I can see her smiling at me. You can always stop this video as you're watching, but it also is being recorded. So, after it's done, then you can watch it again. I learned from my mistake yesterday that I have to save it to my camera roll if I want to add it to YouTube. So I know how to do that today. I learned lots of things. If it's being stubborn, just add some more water. And there's still a thin layer on here, so it depends on how transparent you want this to be. If you don't take much off, then it's going to be translucent instead of transparent. Grade 4 science. Her little arm ripped. So I might decide, because I've already ripped her dress and her arm here, that I might just use her head and this arm. You could also draw. That's another fun thing to do, is just have the head, and then you draw the rest of the body and make part of the background part of the dress or whatever they're wearing. No! Took it too far. I failed epically. I guess the lesson here is apply more. So I'm going to have to print that off again and do it. But I still have her name that I can use. Sorry, Brooklyn. And I could apply that. So I won't waste your time watching me do that part. So the next one is a lot easier. But the reason why I don't like tape as much is because over time I'm not sure what's going to happen to it. So what you can do is you just take some packing tape and you put it down, smooth it out so you don't have bubbles, and then cut. Don't lose the end. I think I'm just going to do her head, but if you're going to do her whole body, then you just add another layer of tape. Oops. But I will do her name. There. And I just lost the end. Worry about that later. Okay, so then you do the same thing. Take 2. All right, let's hope that. Dip it back in the water. Start rubbing. Be gentle though. Man. I'm not having success with this either. Oh no. I think it's because of my printer. Well, sometimes that's how things go. Oh, her eyes are staying on. Okay. Let's try a little bit longer. Let's see. Gone. I'm going to have to practice some more. Find out why it's not working. Oh well. That's the joy of life. Learn from your mistakes. That's the first time I've never been able to do it. Sarah, I know you're watching, and I know you've done it here with Billie Eilish. So I know it can work. All right, so I'm going to come back to my Brooklyn page tomorrow. But what I thought I would do is go back to yesterday's page and just kind of talk about a little bit about finishing things up. So this is tomorrow. When I left off yesterday, I didn't have any words. And so what I did is along this path, I decided to do some journaling, and I just put, we will all get through this. The path is unclear. This coronavirus has put us in isolation, but we can connect and get through this. And then I was going through, I have a stash of fortune cookie slips, and they sort of they sort of matched the blue that was here, but also about, sometimes you think something's an obstacle, but it becomes an opportunity, that I can work both alone and with others because of the internet. Sometimes I do need some solitude, but I do like the fact that we can connect, and then you're going to pass a difficult test, and I think this is testing everybody's patience and creativity by having to stay home and not go out and do all the fun things that we like to normally do. And then I also put, you'll accomplish more if you start now. So I've been thinking about doing these live videos for a year now, and finally now decided to do that. So then instead of just gluing them on, I decided to use some blue marker to incorporate it into the blue that's already there. Then I found these pages. I haven't glued them in yet, but I'm going to glue the globe here because I think, well, we know that this is a global issue. We're connecting globally through this coronavirus, but also with learning how to problem solve and then helping each other out and thinking about other people besides ourselves. Lots of us aren't sick, but we need to think about what happens if we go out and do get sick, and then where we've been and how it's affected others. So I'm just going to glue in these little atlas pages right here. And then I'm still debating about this piece, so I just kind of stuck it on with tape right now. So one of the things to finish off a page is to think about symbolism. And at first I thought this was pretty much done, but then I got to thinking that like the lines on the globe here remind me of a spider web. And yesterday I did see a spider web before, or a spider crawling on my countertop before I started. And it's sort of symbolic of what we're going through right now. Like one minute everything's clean and tidy and normal, and then the next minute we have cobwebs getting trapped in, do we believe this? Do we believe that? Sometimes you get stuck in the trap or the web, but other times you get released. And just so I decided I was going to turn this into a big spider web. And then the line of this path sort of reminded me of all the videos I've been seeing of the people, for example, in Italy, who are hanging their heads out the window and singing and clapping. And so I thought I might turn these into houses, and then along the bottom, maybe put a street and put people sort of clustering, because these are the people that are doubters, thinking that whatever they do is not going to impact other people. While the people that are in the houses know that they can help out and make this not last for a long time by isolating themselves. And so it sort of goes beyond the connection thing, but it's all connected to the coronavirus. And I'm going to use my pencil crayons again, just because they work really well over top of watercolor paints. You could use pastels. You could actually use paint too, but I'm going to. So first of all, I'm going to start off by this being the center of the spider web. Spider webs can be really beautiful too when the rain is on it. And at this stage now, the background suddenly does not become important. It's just adding to the background. And you might be thinking your background looks kind of cheerful compared to your message, but I think I like it that way because that's how I was feeling yesterday. Very connected, very happy. And that's something to think about too when we're going through all this isolation, is it's going to pass eventually, right? And there are some very positive things, like, for example, spending very quality time with my family, with my husband, and also my granddaughter on Skype that I never was able to do before. And now I have to focus on my art instead of business. Sadly, it is affecting business, but you have to move on, right? And I was going to go like this, and I messed up. See, so at first the background was really important to me. Now it's not. It's just pretty. Now I might decide to add something stuck to the cobweb. Sort of like the earth here is caught in the cobweb. But it is possible to get out. There, I like that. And now the buildings. I'm going to try and continue with that lighter color. And I'm going to try to keep it simple. I'm going to take this off for now. I don't know if I need it, because I got that same color in 3 places anyways. Oh, I forgot to leave place for my street. So if this is getting long, don't feel bad about leaving. I will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and we'll start a background in a different way, and I'll try to figure out why. I need a darker color now. See if I can do the transfer again more successfully. I know I've used it on like greeting cards and all kinds of stuff, so I'm not being too worried about being exact. If you did create as we were going, I'd really love to see what you did. Even if you are watching this live, I'd sure love to see what you've done too. Again, if you have any suggestions or comments, I'd love to hear them. I'm learning as I go here, so I'm doing apartment buildings. Even though I live in the country, I've been seeing lots of images of city people. Indigo. I thought I chose black. Oh well. I didn't put a door on. Maybe that's symbolic. Go in, but you can't come out. All right, so I'm going to go 4 more minutes here, and then whatever I don't get done, I will finish, and then I'll show you tomorrow. Maybe I'll do some round, since my theme was circles yesterday. Actually, I'm going to leave the people at the bottom, and then tomorrow I'll show you a fun way of doing people. They're called carrot people. Ooh, at 3 more minutes. I think I'm going to just use my marker and draw some people in the window. This will be fun. They can have sticky up hair. Pigtails. I'm actually going to have hands sticking out. Again, it's not about realism. It's about just having fun. This one's looking sideways. A question that was asked is, will gesso do the same thing as gel medium? Gesso is more like a paint primer, so you're adding white on top to prepare it for the next layer, whereas gel medium is more like glue. On the gel medium box or container, it has what it does is it retains your brush stroke, so you can use it with acrylic paint too. And if you want like to show different layers, you can use that for that. And it also slows the drying time of your paint. And then also it's permanent, and so it covers up with a sort of a plasticky cover, so they don't really do the same thing. And then this is a Moleskine journal. It's specifically for watercolor watercolor paint. Sometimes I use a Strathmore mixed media journal. I use mostly those, but I wanted to give just watercolor paint paper a try because I've never used this brand before. I love this compared to the spiral ones because the spiral books, you have to always, when I had a spiral book, I tended to have two different topics on both sides because it's acted as a barrier, or I had to paint between the spirals, which is a big pain in the neck. And so, so that's what I'm using right now. But sometimes I just buy Strathmore watercolor paper, like from Michaels or the college, and then I sew them together to make books. I agree. I don't think I had a thick enough layer of my gesso, of my matte gel medium to do the transfer. So I'm going to try it again when I leave. I got this Moleskine journal at, believe it or not, Staples. It was right at the end of an aisle with a whole bunch of just gel pens and markers. And there were different kinds for traveling, but this one was specifically for watercolor. It was about $25. So it's sort of in the mid-range for expense. Do you have any other questions? So I'm glad you hung in there to the end. And again, if you have any other questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. You can private message me if you like, or you can just leave it at the end of the comments. Again, please, if you did some art with me today, I'd love to see what you've done. And if you have any tips for me, I'd love to hear them too, because I learn every single day something new. And that's one thing that some people say, well, I've come out and I've had one lesson, now they're ready to go and teach the world. And I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm still learning new things. And so there's like a whole world out there that you can learn. Thanks, Bev. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks, Shannon. Nice to see you again. Hi, Michelle. You made it after all. Right. If you want to, join me again tomorrow and we'll try something new and I'll show you what I've done to fix up my transfers. All right. See ya. Thank you.